So, we're all different, right? But I believe that at some point, we all get this scary feeling when starting a new drawing, even if we just want to do a casual drawing session in our sketchbooks. I definitely struggled with this a lot, and I still do. These past few years, I've created some of my favorite pieces and have drawn more than I ever did before. But I quickly realized that I would still get that feeling every once in a while, no matter how skilled or confident I got. So today, I'd like to share with you some of the ways I found to get over that fear and anxiety and just start. I know that not everyone feels this way, so if these tips don't work for you, that's absolutely okay. But if you think that you'd benefit from trying some of these, I do invite you to try anything that might work for you or that just simply looks fun to do. I do want to get a bit deeper into this topic, but first, let's start off with the classics. You might have seen this one before, where you just scribble down a bunch of lines and try to figure out some interesting shapes that might remind you of different objects, faces, anything that you can think of. This is a great way to start warming up and to get new ideas, since there is no pressure right away to accomplish anything. The purpose is for you to mess up and draw things that don't make any sense, and only then try to shape them into something new. This can be incredibly fun, just because of how loose and uncommitted you can start feeling right away. After all, you're already putting ink on paper, so you're already moving in the right direction. This is something that I've tried to do before, but unfortunately, it hasn't really worked for me. A great variation that I prefer, though, is to actually use blobs instead of lines to get started first. I don't know why, maybe it just feels easier to splash around some paint first and not move towards lines right away. But either way, it can be really freeing to just mess around with different shapes, colors, and give yourself a chance to play around before you start thinking. You can even use other materials if you feel more comfortable, like charcoal, markers, pastels, flowy inks, gouache, and so on. You'd be surprised to see just how many pages you can fill in with just this technique. If your goal is to just get started and get over that empty page, this can be a great way to do that. Now moving on to my favorite technique, why not just draw what's around you? This is one of my favorite ways of unblocking that piece of my brain that just doesn't know what to draw at all. Sometimes I just really want to enjoy the feeling of drawing. I don't know if you feel this way too, but the textures, the sounds, drawing is such a fun experience. And when I don't know where to start, I often draw things that are around me. These can be things that are on my desk, things that I find around the house, and you can even start with small stuff that doesn't scare you at all. You don't necessarily need to draw your entire environment, think about perspective too much, or worry about getting things just right. If you're outside, you can simply draw a tree and its interesting shapes, a bench, a coffee cup, a meal, a fire hydrant, whatever you want. If you're at home though, my personal favorite place to lurk around is the kitchen. I don't know what it is about it, but it feels like even when my kitchen is absolutely tidy, there's always a bunch of clutter that feels so fun to explore. This is a good example of one of those drawings where it started off as a quick doodle of things that were on my counter, but the more I kept exploring everything, loosening up and feeling the joy of drawing, the more I kept filling in every little space. And this was at a time where I felt really down on myself last year, and it just made me have so much fun in such an unexpected place that it once again reminded me to just not take things so seriously, and to just find a place to start, no matter what that looks like. To help you out, a good idea might be to place your objects within structures like boxes. Or you can forget about structure altogether and break apart your objects, bend them, and let your mind wander away. Speaking of boxes and cube shapes overall, play with them. It's a simple enough idea, but it can really get your mind working. Just sketch out a bunch of boxes in space, rotating, even bending if you want to, and place things inside of them. This can be a little bit challenging, but in some ways, it turns the act of drawing into almost like a mathematical problem. It's like a game where you can keep placing boxes on top of each other, connecting them, and playing with fun perspectives that you might not even explore otherwise. This is something that I used to do a lot back when I was in school as well, especially around the edges of my notebooks, because it was such a good way to let my mind wander, just like a doodle that you need to figure out. You can even break them apart, try some crazy fisheye perspective, which is always fun, and just get lost in the process, instead of thinking too much about it to begin with. Also, something a little bit weird that might work, especially if you struggle mentally with having to create the perfect drawing in the most beautiful and symmetrical faces, a good idea might be to just quickly switch your goals to the opposite direction. What I mean by that is, if you're afraid of making a quote-unquote bad drawing, or an ugly one, no matter what that even means, why not just do that? Why not take a few minutes to just draw the ugliest thing that you can possibly draw? In my most recent Draw With Me video on Patreon, I actually used the analogy of trying to get out the biggest smile you can in the morning, when you have just woken up with a headache and your face feels really stiff, like it hasn't woken up yet. It can actually make you feel a lot better and even happier, just by the sheer silliness of it. This is kind of a crazy example, but it can be really freeing to just get out the worst things you can possibly do, and it can help take out all of the seriousness of it too. It's almost like facing your fears and getting them out right at the beginning so that they don't scare you anymore. Honestly, for me, sometimes that freezing feeling was so overwhelming that doing this might not fix it completely, but it got me to a place where I was actually doing something about it, and for that alone, I think it can be really helpful. Here's an important one that I still use to this day: set limitations for yourself. This means to remove the overwhelming choice fatigue we might often find ourselves with. Instead of thinking too much about what materials to use and getting stuck on every small decision, simply take a piece of paper and one pen or pencil and remove everything else, even when it comes to bigger drawings or more ambitious illustrations. A good example of that is this drawing. This is a really important drawing for me. I made it almost 4 years ago when I was living in a very small apartment, drawing on the floor with very few materials to begin with. I hadn't drawn for over 2 years and was feeling very depressed and anxious, so starting anything new felt incredibly overwhelming. But still, at the time, something that helped me get started was actually my limitations. Do you see that red highlight color that I used on those clouds? It was actually my only colored marker at the time, so I didn't really have much else to use to make this piece feel more interesting. But back then, I think that was actually a good thing. It simply got me started somewhere. It removed a lot of the overthinking that I was used to feeling at that time, and I definitely tried to make the most of it. I am grateful that right now I can choose from many different colors and materials, but sometimes I still need to remind myself that if I'm feeling stuck, a good way to start is to block out all of the noise, remove the choice fatigue, and focus on one or two things only, like one notepad and one pen. This is something that especially works for me when I go out and want to draw in different places, just because I often get stuck on what I should or shouldn't use for the best results. But if I don't have that many choices, I don't waste a lot of time thinking and overthinking about what I'm doing. I am forced to do the best with what I've got, and I really appreciate that. And that's a good way to change things up too. Change your scenery. This is a really quick one, and it might not work every time, but if you're feeling stuck, sometimes just looking around at different things can feel very refreshing. Since I draw very frequently and I work from home, this is definitely something that helps me a lot. Just a change of my surroundings or simply going outside, especially in nature, can really help me see things through a different lens. And sometimes, if you've been stuck for a really long time, going back to the same place every time to try and draw something new and struggling with it might start to make you associate that place and those circumstances with your stress and anxiety. So maybe change things up. Try drawing on your commute to work or school if you use public transportation, when you're waiting at the doctor's office, on hikes, and so on. Anywhere that might make you feel good is a plus, and for me that has been nature. It just switches things up just enough to give me a different perspective and leave me feeling refreshed. This is a new one for me, believe it or not. Since I've started to do warm-ups and doodles more often, I hadn't really taken into account the materials that I was using. And that can be very subjective, but I would just default to the simplest things like graphite. And don't get me wrong, I do love using graphite to draw in general, but there's something very special in finding one particular material, like a pen or a pencil, that's just very satisfying to use. And for me, that's been my multicolored pen. It's incredibly cheap, which makes me feel better about using it a lot. It makes it super easy to choose different colors on a whim, and there's just something really satisfying about the strokes that it creates. Ever since I got this pen, I have found myself doodling with it just to feel that feeling. That has also happened before with this simple black ballpoint pen. It's just so buttery smooth that the act of drawing itself becomes so fun and engaging that you can't really be too afraid to use it. I also love this inking pen that I've had for a really long time, but it's super delicate, so it requires me to be so careful and focused that it can sometimes take some of the fun out of it. So it really depends on what you enjoy using, what you have available to you right now, and what feels the most comfortable for you to use. The good thing about this one tip is that you really don't have to spend too much money to get something that's very satisfying. So really go out there and try different things that might fill you with joy. In the interest of staying true to who we are and acknowledging the fact that we're all so different from each other, it might also be a good idea to stop and think of what makes us feel the most at ease. I say that because I've noticed how there are so many things out there that we believe we need to have or need to do when that might not be the best thing for us. Actually, a really good and simple example of that is using a sketchbook. Keeping a sketchbook is an amazing thing. It can be incredibly helpful and give you a great guide to see your progress. But at the same time, it can also pressure you into using that space only to create a certain type of drawing that feels very set in stone, especially if you share your work online like I do. If you're feeling stressed or anxious and you're overthinking what you should or should not do in your sketchbook, why not leave it for a little bit? Lately, I've actually been drawing on loose paper because of that, and also for my wrist pain, and it's been really helpful. It feels so non-committal to just draw whatever I feel like in a loose piece of paper that I can just cut out later and add to my sketchbook, or throw it away altogether. In those times where I can't seem to focus and get started, that has truly been a game changer. In that same vein, you can change other things that might bother you. For example, if the bright white pages scare you, try switching it up to a more toned, yellowish paper that feels more comfortable to the eyes. Also, if at this time in your life, spending more money on supplies is something that brings you more stress and anxiety, use more affordable options. I've definitely felt the pressure of using an expensive sketchbook and sharpening expensive colored pencils, so I make sure to take that out of the equation whenever I'm feeling particularly overwhelmed. And in the spirit of trying to avoid feeling overwhelmed, I do have to recommend limiting your use of social media. This also applies to Pinterest, which, even though it is incredibly helpful to find references and inspiration, it can actually distract you and overwhelm you before you even give yourself a chance to get started. Since it can show you anything from aesthetic pictures to beautiful drawings, it can quickly distract you into a place of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and overall just information overload. It doesn't necessarily happen every time, but I can say that I've started to avoid it a lot more recently, and it has definitely made a huge difference in my workflow and focus, letting me slow down a bit and take things one step at a time. Removing any distractions you can, like your phone and social media, can always be a good way of setting yourself up for success and bringing your mind into the present. So take advantage of it as much as you can. These are just a few quick tips that can hopefully help you overcome some of your fears, shut off your brain, and get drawing. But a good thing to remember is that these can actually become great habits that make for a really balanced and healthy relationship with your art. Here's an example. For a long time, I was slowly starting to look at my sketchbook the wrong way. Actually, I was going about drawing altogether the wrong way. As I started to draw more frequently and share my work more consistently online, I started to put a lot more pressure on myself, like many of us do, and after a while, I was setting such high expectations on my drawings, especially the ones on my sketchbook, that unfortunately I got to a place where just simply turning a page and starting a new drawing felt very scary and overwhelming. I also got into the habit of just sitting down and trying to start a beautiful new drawing right away. I didn't even sketch or warm up first. I knew that I needed to get something done and it needed to be good, so just doodling away random lines or messing with different things didn't feel like a useful use of my time, but I was absolutely wrong. Actually taking the time, even if it's just 10 minutes, to doodle and play before I actually started working on a more complex and intimidating piece could save me hours of overthinking and procrastination, which happened many times. So make it a habit, like brushing your teeth, until you don't even need to think about it anymore. Lately, especially these past few months, I've learned that a lot of what I thought was obvious was actually kind of wrong. A lot of the grind mindset, the hard work mindset, the motivation and persistent nature of art were actually just a part of the equation and not the full picture. A lot of it also comes down to balance and to keep engaging with things in a fun way and in a way that feels genuine to us. It's about realizing that we might need to do things differently from what others do, finding the things that work for us, and learning more about ourselves through our own lived experiences and not necessarily other people's. So ultimately, if right now you're not feeling very confident or excited to start drawing, really think about what's making you feel that way and what might be missing from your equation. For me, what's really helped has been to cut off social media almost altogether. I've tried to cut out other sources of stress and anxiety and really pay attention to what I'm consuming and to how much of it I'm consuming. My goal this year has been to create more than what I consume, and that's a really scary thing to even think about. It seems like almost impossible to do that these days, but I think it can be a really beautiful goal to pursue and just a wonderful place to start. Let me know in the comments what's your favorite way of getting through your drawing slumps, and let's help each other out. And if you'd like to come draw with me and face these obstacles together in real-time drawing sessions, come join us on Patreon. We've recently added a brand new monthly series called Cozy Art Corner, where I draw and chat in long-form sessions on top of our monthly step-by-steps and process videos. There's so much happening over there each month, so check it out if you're interested. A really special thank you to my patrons for their continuous support. I really appreciate you all from the bottom of my heart and love what we've been building together. But other than that, happy drawing and talk very soon. Bye!